They told me the work would be nothing more than routine, cataloguing fragments, cleaning brittle parchment, transcribing faded Latin into clean digital type. No one mentioned the smell of the archives, that blend of smoke and mildew and something coppery, faintly sweet, like blood that had dried centuries ago but never fully left the stone. No one mentioned the way the guards watched me, not as a guest or a scholar, but as if they were waiting for me to touch the wrong shelf so they'd finally have the excuse to remove me. I should have known then that this was not meant for an outsider like me, an academic drifter with no proper title, only a record of curiosity that carried me further than common sense ever did. The assignment came through a professor I barely knew, a Jesuit with hands that trembled even when he blessed the bread at Mass. He spoke quickly, too quickly, when he offered me the chance. The Archivum Secretum Apostolicum, he whispered, though the Vatican prefers the euphemism apostolic archive now, as though a change in name could exorcise centuries of whispers. He said they needed temporary assistance, lay researchers with a background in paleography. I didn't ask why he wouldn't do it himself. I should have. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He kept clutching his wrist, rubbing the skin as though something had once been burned there. When I arrived in Rome, I expected the beauty everyone dreams of, piazzas glowing with evening light, marble saints staring serenely down. But the Vatican walls felt like a fortress, not a sanctuary. The Swiss guard at the gates barely nodded as they checked my papers. Their halberds were ceremonial, yet their eyes were not. Each step across the stone courtyard made me feel smaller, as though I had crossed into a kingdom where my name, my past, even my body no longer belonged to me. They escorted me through hallways of frescoes whose paint peeled like scabs. I noticed that Christ's eyes were often gouged out, not by vandalism, but by design, as if someone centuries ago had wanted to make sure his gaze would not follow. One guard caught me staring too long and said in thick Italian, "Some things are safer unseen." It wasn't a warning, it was an order. The archives themselves were not silent the way libraries usually are. Instead, they seemed to breathe. A constant shifting in the dark, like pages turning themselves or chains dragged across stone floors just out of sight. The air was colder than outside, and I shivered though it was midsummer. The director, a lean priest with cheeks hollowed from fasting, greeted me without warmth. He handed me a list of manuscripts, each marked with restricted sigils that I had never seen in any catalogue before. "You will not deviate from this," he said. "You will not wander. There are areas that are not for you. Understand that curiosity is a form of theft." His words stuck like pins in my skin. I should have left then. Every instinct in me said this was no ordinary job, that they were measuring me, testing how far I'd obey. But I didn't leave. I thought it was only fear of the unknown, of the myth of forbidden knowledge. Scholars like me dream of glimpses others aren't allowed to see. That hunger drove me deeper than caution ever could. The first manuscripts were as expected, letters of excommunication, trial records of heretics, papal bulls that never saw the light of day. But as I read, I noticed references that made no sense, names I had never encountered in any theological index. Names not of men or women, but of things, shadows spoken of as if they were witnesses, margins filled with warnings. Do not pronounce the fourth. Do not carry the sound across water. A strange system of numeration appeared repeatedly, almost Kabbalistic, dividing each page into measured spaces, as though the words themselves were part of a larger architecture. And then I found it, a ledger bound in cracked leather, unmarked on the spine. When I opened it, the ink looked too dark, still wet though centuries must have passed. The first page listed researchers, scholars, priests, their names, their dates of assignment, their outcomes. Some were marked with a cross, others with a sigil I could not decipher. My breath caught when I reached the most recent page. There was my name, written in the same ancient hand, in ink that had not yet dried. I cannot describe the terror of seeing yourself inscribed in a book that should not know you. My hands trembled. I thought it a prank, perhaps one of the priests mocking the new outsider. But when I touched the ink, it did not smear. It sank into my skin, a warmth that pulsed as if alive. I closed the ledger quickly, shoved it back into place, and tried to tell myself I imagined it. But when I turned, one of the guards was standing in the aisle. He had not made a sound. His face showed no expression, but his lips moved silently, forming a word I could not hear. That night in my room, I dreamed of corridors beneath the archives, endless staircases spiraling down, walls lined with books whose spines shifted like breathing flesh. I woke with my sheets twisted around me, my chest heaving, and the taste of ash on my tongue. When I splashed water on my face, the mirror fogged though the air was cold. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw a word traced in the condensation, a word I knew from the margins of those forbidden manuscripts. Before I could blink, it was gone. The next morning, when I returned, the director did not look at me the same way. There was something satisfied in his expression, as though I had crossed a threshold he knew I would. He said nothing, only gestured for me to continue. And I did. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could control it, that knowledge, once uncovered, could be managed, tamed, catalogued. But deep down, I knew I had already stepped into something older than the Vatican itself, something the priests only pretend to guard, but secretly serve. I should have refused the assignment. I should have walked back out those gates before the ink dried. But I didn't. And now, when I close my eyes, I hear pages turning somewhere in the dark. I feel the ledger pulsing in my chest as if my life is no longer written in flesh, but in their records. I should have left the first time I saw my name. But I didn't, and it's too late now. I still don't know who wrote my name in that book, but every night I feel the ink inside me whispering, reminding me that the Vatican never loses track of what belongs to it. They tell me the south wing is sealed for safety, fire-damaged, unstable, a place where plaster sheds in thin scabs and the wiring sleeps like coiled snakes in the walls. The iron gate wears an official plaque, and taped beneath it in nervous ink, a smaller label, INTRDICTUM. Even so, when I pass after Vespers, the corridor is already lit with a low amber glow, not fluorescent and not quite candlelight, something in between that has the warmth of a mouth. The key they gave me should not fit, but the teeth find a home in the old lock as if cut for it. I should have kept walking. Instead, I turn, breathe once, and open the condemned wing. The hinges complain and then fall quiet, like someone shushing them from inside. Cold air carries a spent match sweetness, a hint of damp linen and soot. Dust lifts from the floor in organized spirals, turns twice, and settles in rings around my shoes, a compass I did not draw. I start namming architecture to steady my hands, nave, transept, ambulatory, even though this is only a service corridor once linking archive rooms to a chapel. A fresco peels on the first wall, a saint whose eyes have been carefully scraped away, not vandalism, but correction. Some things are safer unseen, one of the guards told me on my first day. I hear his voice and realize he never meant people. Light pools at measured intervals, each island of brightness ending just before the next begins, so that each stride must choose allegiance to one circle or the other. At the second pool, I find a pew. At the third, another. They are not stacked the way surplus furniture usually is. They are aligned with liturgical exactness, all facing a blank plaster panel where a small apse ought to be, as if devotion can be pointed at absence. When I rest my palm on a bench, heat lingers, they're like the echo of a kneeling body. The kneeler creaks without weight. My name arrives in a whisper that is only the wind moving through cracks, but it uses my syllables perfectly. I should have turned back then. Pride wears the mask of skepticism, and I am too used to both. I walk on because paperwork can always crush a mistake into jargon later. Report the fire risk, request the electrician, cite liability, attach photos with red circles. At the fourth pool of light a lectern waits, plain oak, its base braced with a chain whose padlock sits closed yet unlatched, the theatre of a lock. A vellum folio lies open on the slanted top, corners pinned by red wax that looks new and dusty at the same time, as if time misbehaves on this stand. The script is formal, the old ecclesiastical hand that values authority over speed. I recognize the structure. Rubric in red, invocations in black, marginalia in a different ink for warnings no one should need twice. After the ledger that already knew my name, I promised myself I would not say unfamiliar syllables aloud again. But the mouth loves rhythm. My breath falls into it before I notice. Rubrica admonitio interrogatio. In the margin, a hurried human note interrupts the ceremony. Non pronuntes quartum. Do not pronounce the fourth. I count the invocations, 1, 2, 3, and see where the next ought to be. A blank notch, precisely measured, as if the absence itself is a letter whose sound the page refuses to trap. My tongue presses against my teeth like a magnet testing a locked gate. I close my lips and feel the pressure of unspoken shape buzzing against them like a caged insect. I should stop, I tell myself, and pretend that the fact I think it means I might. Beyond the lectern, the corridor narrows and opens into a low chapel I have never seen on any plan. The apse is whitewashed and spare, except for a hairline crack that climbs the curve like a vein seeking the ceiling. The pews continue here in perfect rows, the aisle exact, chalk dust still visible where someone measured, erased, measured again, unwilling to tolerate a crooked devotion. A cold mineral draught rises from the crack and settles into my teeth. Somewhere beyond the wall, a slow drip keeps time, a metronome for a choir that has not arrived. I hear my breath come back to me a half-second late, the corridor practicing me. The candlestands hold flames that are not on the wicks. They hover a finger's breadth above, blue-white at their base, breathing in a tempo that matches mine. I lift my hand, and the nearest flame bows and steadies, like a creature considering whether to approach. On the altar, a slab of limestone scored with chalk geometry, objects rest in a pattern I remember from inquisitorial diagrams. 7 placements used when weighing testimony. A bowl of water with a coin that refuses to sink. A length of cord knotted 3 times and twice unknotted. A quill whose nib is black though the well beside it is dry. The arrangement is not decoration, it is procedure. I should stop at the bowl. In older admonitions, water is a conduit. A name rides it farther than breath can carry, and the reflective skin is a door that opens the wrong way after sundown. I lean in anyway, because my skepticism is only superstition in a lab coat, and the surface shows not my face but text, letters rising in ripples and collapsing before I can hold them. Officium tenebrarum, I think, but the phrase refuses to remain. When I reach to still the water, my finger meets a skin that is not liquid, a soft resistance like leather warmed by someone's breath. The coin spins without traveling, and the bowl hums a note too low for the ear and just loud enough for the bones. Footsteps enter the corridor behind me, deliberate, counting the pools of light. 1, 2, 3, pausing at each boundary as if whoever walks must learn the room again before crossing it. I turn to call out that the gate was open and I will leave, but no one stands in the doorway. The pressure of the air drops as if weather has changed inside stone. The chalk lines on the altar smudge and redraw themselves in the same pattern, corrected by a hand I cannot see. Somewhere a bell tries to ring without a clapper and fails, again and again, a repetition that feels like training. Quis te missit? Who sent you? The Latin arrives with the flat cadence of a tribunal. I answer with the Jesuit's name, too quickly, like a student guessing. The chapel repeats it with a note of pity, elongating the vowels until it sounds like a word for orphan. The pew nearest the aisle gives a small creak and holds it, the way wood does when it bears a new weight. Then the next pew accepts an invisible shoulder, a bowed head, and the tremor travels row by row toward me until the entire nave exhales and waits. I thought I was imagining it until the kneeler at my shins shifts the smallest distance and holds that new position as if something has settled there to pray. I should leave, I say, and this time the room does not echo. It replies, Tace, be silent. The nearest flame stretches toward my chest, and though the wick does not move, heat gathers over the place above my heart in the faint shape of a sigil I have never learned and somehow remember. In the whine between breaths I hear a melody without notes, dies irae reduced to a single held nerve, and under it a name cracks across the chapel like ice splitting on a lake. It is not the fourth name, but it is kin to it, and my mouth knows the next syllable by instinct. I clamp my teeth shut so hard the metallic taste arrives. Back away, I tell my body, and it obeys in reverent inches, as if a ritual exit could protect me better than flight. At the threshold, the hovering flames gutter without extinguishing, the footsteps reverse their count, and the rhythm of the pools of light unwinds down the corridor as if nothing has happened. By the time I reach the gate, my key hand shakes hard enough to ring the iron. Outside, everything is ordinary again. Dull paint, a frayed runner, the holy smell of furniture polish, the sound of someone cough whispering 2 floors away. I lock the gate, test it twice, and keep my eyes on the neutral hallway until my breath believes me. In my room, I write a report that says nothing. The south wing remains sealed. The lamps are extinguished. Safety protocols are intact. I paste institutional phrases over what I saw the way fresco restorers paste gauze over flacking paint, hopping that holding something in place equals repair. I tell myself I imagined the delayed echo, the weightless congregation, the water that pushed back. But when I press my palm to my chest, the skin is warm in a shape that matches the flame's reach, a ghost of touch drawn there from the inside. I should have stopped when I read the marginal warning. I should have stopped when the pews felt warm. I should have stopped when the bowl hummed. But I kept reading, and the room kept answering, and the line between us learned how to speak. By dawn, sleep has not arrived. Doors open and close down the corridor in a sequence that approaches and recedes like someone practicing entrances for a trial. Glass hums at a single pitch. In the mirror, my mouth moves a fraction of a second before I speak, as if something has taken the liberty of rehearsing me and only then allows me to follow. At breakfast, the director studies my face until I feel powdered chalk in my hair. "You went there," he says, not asking. "It is condemned." I nod and pretend the word means unsafe in the way of beams and bricks, not judged in the way of souls. The old nun who tends the catalogue trolley pauses beside me, rosary ticking like a small clock. Without looking up, she mutters, "The forbidden wing isn't empty. It's never empty. It just pretends when you stare too hard." She moves on before I can ask her anything, leaving her smoke smell and a sentence I wish I could unknow. I return to the reading room like a penitent returning to a pew, head down, page up. The south wing door is closed, undisturbed, a locked mouth with nothing more to say. Yet through the floor, a tide of slow warmth rises at intervals that match my pulse, as if the corridor were breathing under the marble. I tell myself I'm imagining it until the coin on the librarian's desk rattles in place without wind and then settles as if it had agreed to be quiet. Somewhere, faintly, a bell with no clapper tries again and almost succeeds. I leave the report on the director's desk, but the truth follows me anyway, counting steps in a language my mouth already knows and waiting for me to answer with the fourth syllable. I don't know if the alcove was ever part of the original blueprint. None of the floor plans I'd been issued, copies redrawn and sanitized by the prefecture, had even a shadow of it marked. And yet one afternoon, while tracing a corridor that bent farther than my memory insisted it should, I found a low arch bricked over, the mortar crumbling in soft white flakes. Behind it, there was space. I knew it before I even touched the stone. The draft seeping out was not air, but the kind of temperature you only feel when someone exhales onto your neck from close enough to count each tooth in their breath. I should have kept walking. I should have reported the structural fault and waited for it to be patched, but curiosity is a drug no archivist knows how to refuse. My fingernails scraped the mortar. The dust tasted bitter on my tongue. The wall gave way more easily than I expected, the bricks groaning but obedient, as if they had been waiting centuries to fall apart. Beyond was a pocket of darkness, not wide enough for a chapel, not long enough for a corridor, but shaped like a cavity in a rotting tooth. The smell hit me first. Wax that had melted and rehardened 1,000 times, parchment soaked in oil, and beneath it the faintest stench of decay, long hidden but not defeated. The alcove held a pedestal of simple oak, worm-eaten, its surface smoothed by centuries of reluctant hands. Upon it lay a Bible, though not like any I had seen catalogued in the Vatican's endless collections. The cover was blackened hide stretched tight, brittle and cracking, but still faintly moist where the leather should have turned to powder centuries ago. My hand hovered above it, and even without contact, I felt warmth radiating. Not the warmth of life, but of something alive, something restless. When I finally opened it, The first pages seemed ordinary. Latin verses I knew by rote, gilded initials where scribes had once displayed their mastery. But soon the order frayed. Margins filled with notations in hands that shifted as though pennied by different centuries without bothering to change the ink. Words of correction crossed out by later words of denial, then later still by symbols I could not decipher, spirals, hooks, lines that reminded me of surgical sutures. And then I turned to the final page. It wasn't parchment. It wasn't even paper. My stomach knew before my eyes allowed themselves to register. It was sewn skin, stretched too taut, pores visible, veins faint as threads beneath the surface. My hands shook violently, and still I turned the page because I had to know. The ink there was darker than ink should be, almost gleaming, almost wet. As I leaned closer, I realized the letters did not hold still. They pulsed, swelling and shrinking like lips mouthing a prayer too soft to hear. When my finger brushed the surface, the ink bled upward, curling into the air as if eager to be spoken aloud. I had promised myself, after the ledger with my name already written, I would never again read aloud in those rooms. But the body is treacherous. My lips moved before I knew it. The syllable was jagged, too harsh for a human throat. My voice cracked halfway through, but the name completed itself without my consent, as if something inside my chest had been waiting to lend its tongue. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than I'd ever known. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something immense, waiting, listening. My ears rang, my skin flushed hot, and every candle flame in the alcove snapped to attention, burning blue for the length of one heartbeat. When the world returned, it returned bent. I thought I saw movement at the edges of the alcove, shadows curling inward, shapes crouched just beyond reach, their eyes reflecting like the glass of reliquaries in torchlight. But when I turned my head, there was nothing. Only the Bible, its last page breathing faintly like a lung beneath stitches. I tried to close it. It refused. The cover snapped back open each time, as though magnets lived in the fibers of my hands. Desperate, I forced it shut and staggered backward, clutching the edge of the pedestal. That was when I noticed the whispering. Not out loud, not in the alcove, in me. My thoughts were no longer my own. The name I had spoken, fractured and raw, repeated itself in rhythm with my pulse. Every time the word echoed inside me, my body responded, a twitch in my fingers, a shiver up my spine, an ache in the scarless skin over my ribs where no wound should ache. I fled. I left the alcove unsealed, mortar crumbs still under my nails, and walked through the archive corridors as though chased. Perhaps I was. The guards noticed. Their eyes tracked me more intently than usual, their jaws locked shut, but none of them spoke. At the doorway to the reading room, one priest leaned close, his lips not moving, but the whisper still audible inside my head. You should not have spoken it. I wanted to demand how he knew. Instead, I ran. That night, my dreams were no longer my own. I saw the page breathing beneath the skin, its pores opening into mouths that sang without voices. I saw myself kneeling in a chamber I had never visited, the floor engraved with sigils that glowed like iron fresh from the forge. Above me hung a crown of black glass, descending slowly, promising weight. I woke choking, my throat raw, my pillow damp with tears and blood. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, stress, the cost of staring too long into the labyrinth of forbidden knowledge. But even as I argued with myself, my body betrayed me again. I spoke the name in the shower without realizing it, my voice bouncing off the tile like someone else. I muttered it in the library stacks while running my fingers over bindings that should not have trembled at my touch. And each time, the silence returned, heavier, closer, folding the world inward like pages closing around me. By the third day, my reflection no longer matched me. Not entirely. Its lips were moving before mine did, mouthing that syllable with pleasure, as though rehearsing it for when I could not. I draped a cloth over the mirror and prayed in whispers I barely remembered, but the cloth bulged outward, as if something on the other side leaned too close. I should have confessed. I should have reported the alcove and begged for release, for exorcism, for anything. But fear held me by the throat, and pride whispered that perhaps this was knowledge, not damnation. Perhaps what I had found was simply too old, too raw, for the church to admit it kept. I clung to that lie because it was easier than admitting I had already been claimed. But tonight, as I write this, I feel the name inside me like a second heartbeat. My chest thrums when I sit still, the rhythm of a hymn I do not know. The ink that bled from the page has not left my finger. It spreads, faint but steady, beneath the nail, curling veins black like roots moving toward bone. I press my hand to my skin and feel heat gathering, as though words themselves are being written inside me. I read a page that should not exist. I spoke a line that should never be spoken. And now, every silence belongs to it. I can hear the name even now, waiting at the edge of my breath, and I know one day soon it will speak me before I can speak it. The Vatican at dusk is supposed to be beautiful. The bells toll, the marble glows like bone in the setting sun, and pilgrims shuffle toward their evening prayers with tired reverence. But when I walked into Vespers that night, beauty abandoned me. The chapel smelled of scorched oil and something that reminded me of wet wool forgotten in a cellar. My skin prickled with the awareness that the air was not carrying incense, but something sharper, metallic, as though the prayers themselves bled into the stone. I told myself I came because I needed to blend in. I needed to sit among them, to pretend I was still a visitor, a harmless scholar, not a trespasser who had opened a wall, touched skin sewn into scripture, and spoken syllables that refused to leave my lungs. But the moment I stepped inside, I realized blending was impossible. Their chant had already begun, and it was not Latin, not Greek, not Hebrew. It was something raw, an older tongue I couldn't place, a language that felt like bones grinding together. The pew creaked beneath me, wood worn smooth by centuries of penitence, yet tonight no one bent forward in prayer. Every priest sat upright, faces lifted, eyes rolled so far back only the white sclera gleamed in candlelight. Their lips moved in perfect unison, forming syllables my ears could not decode, but my marrow seemed to recognize. Each sound passed through me like a tolling bell muffled in soil, too low to hear clearly, too heavy to ignore. I watched their hands. Some clutched rosaries, but the beads slid too quickly, faster than any prayer should allow, a blur of motion, as if they were counting not decades but centuries. Others pressed their palms flat to the wood, fingers twitching in rhythm, tapping patterns into the pews as if they were marking time for something hidden beneath the floor. I kept my head bowed, forcing my lips to move in silent imitation of familiar prayers. Pater Noster, Ave Maria, anything to make me look ordinary. But I felt the lie of it. I felt the heat blooming in my chest again, the syllable from the alcove stirring like a parasite, eager to join their chant. My teeth clenched. I dug my nails into my palms until crescents of blood dotted my skin. Still, the word pressed at my lips, begging release. Then it happened. The rhythm broke. One priest in the third row ceased his chant mid-syllable. His shoulders stiffened. His head turned. Slowly, impossibly, it turned further and further until his face met mine, though his body still faced forward. The crack of vertebrae carried through the silence, a splintering echo swallowed by stone. His mouth stretched in something between a grin and a wound. "You've already started the trial," he whispered, though his lips never moved. The voice bloomed inside my skull, intimate as thought, undeniable as hunger. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled against the pew. I looked around, desperate for someone else to notice, but the others continued chanting, their cadence unbroken, their eyes rolled white, as if the interruption did not exist for them, as if I was the only one being addressed. The priest's gaze, if it could be called that, held me pinned. My heart hammered. I wanted to stand, to run, but my legs felt bolted to the stone floor. The chant rose louder, filling the chamber with vibrations that made the crucifix above the altar tremble. Candles bent in the draught of their collective voices, wax dripping faster as though melting in fear. I tried to whisper a prayer, but the syllable from the alcove slipped past my lips instead. My voice joined theirs without my consent. The moment it left me, I felt the priest's twisted head tilt in satisfaction. My body shuddered. My throat burned. And when the word finished, silence clamped down with the finality of a slammed door. Every priest froze. Their mouths closed. The air thickened with expectation. Slowly, their eyes rolled back into place, black pupils settling on me. Dozens of gazes locked me in place, too many eyes to endure. The pew beneath me seemed to pulse, the wood trembling faintly as though sharing in their attention. No one spoke, no one moved, and then just as suddenly the chant resumed, louder now, faster, furious. The words pounded into my skull, vibrating my teeth. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me, not around me. The chant wasn't meant for ears, it was meant for souls. The priest whose head had twisted now faced forward again, as though nothing unnatural had ever happened. Yet I knew what I'd heard. The trial has started. Trial for what? For trespassing into the alcove? For reading words I should never have touched? Or was it something older, something woven into the Vatican's bones long before I set foot inside? I stumbled from the pew, my legs unsteady. No one stopped me. No one turned their heads. They ignored me entirely, as if I didn't exist, or as if I already belonged too deeply to be worth acknowledging. My footsteps echoed, the only sound not in rhythm with their chant. When I reached the doors, I felt a heat at my back, like the gaze of something monumental pressing into me. My hand shook as it gripped the bronze handle, slick with sweat. As the doors creaked open, the chanting surged one final time, a crashing wave of syllables that stole my breath and rattled my bones. And then silence again, absolute, oppressive, as the doors slammed shut behind me. Outside, the night air felt thin, artificial. The stars seemed painted, too still, too sharp. My body ached, my throat raw from a chant I swore I didn't speak, yet my tongue remembered its rhythm like a song I had sung since birth. Back in my quarters, I stared into the mirror again, hoping to find myself unchanged. But my reflection was wrong. My lips moved just slightly out of sync, shaping syllables soundlessly, the same rhythm as the priest's. I screamed at it to stop, but the reflection only stared back, lips continuing until mine fell in line once again. That night, sleep refused me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the chapel, the priests with their eyes rolled back, their mouths moving in unison. And always, always, that one twisted head whispering what I cannot forget. The trial has begun, and no matter how I fight it, I know I am already answering questions I never heard asked. I told myself I would not go back. After the chanting, after the way their eyes had pinned me in place, after the whispered warning that I was already on trial, I swore I would leave the archives untouched. I even began packing. But at night, when the rest of the city slept, my chest ached with a steady rhythm, the word from the alcove beating against my ribs as though it wanted out. My dreams became corridors, staircases, vaulted ceilings far too large for any cathedral I knew. And in every dream I descended, always down, never up. The next evening, when I passed the basilica, I noticed something I had never seen before, a faint seam in the stone behind the altar, as though the wall had been fitted with a panel no one wanted noticed. I stopped breathing. For a moment I told myself it was fatigue, shadows, a trick of candlelight. But I knew better. I had seen how these places concealed their secrets. I knew a hidden door when I stood before one. I should have walked away. I should have gone back to my room, locked the door, and prayed. But instead, my hand pressed against the stone. The panel shifted, soundless, revealing a narrow stairwell spiraling into darkness. The air that rose from it was not musty like most old crypts. It was damp, metallic, and faintly sweet, like the breath of something freshly dead. I lit a taper and stepped inside. Each stair was slick with moisture, as though water bled from the walls themselves. Drops fell at intervals, echoing in the silence, counting time in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. The stone was carved not like architecture, but like cartilage, smooth in some places, ridged in others, as if sculpted from something organic long ago. My fingers recoiled from its touch, yet I couldn't stop tracing the ridges, the grooves shaped in spirals and knots that seemed to hum beneath my skin. At the bottom, the stair opened into a vast chamber. My taper flickered weakly, swallowed by the enormity of the room. It wasn't built, it was hollowed. The ceiling arched high above, blackened with soot, stalactites of bone suspended like frozen screams. The walls were lined with niches, each holding fragments of relics, Skulls, femurs, shriveled hands wrapped in rosaries, chalices encrusted with something that wasn't rust. And in the center, raised upon a dais of stacked skulls, sat a throne. The figure on the throne wore robes crimson as arterial blood, stitched with golden thread that pulsed faintly like veins alive under skin. The sleeves hung empty at first, until I realized they were. Something moved within them, slow, deliberate, like the shifting of jointed limbs. But what drew my eyes, against my will, was the hood. It concealed the face, yet the void beneath it wasn't darkness. It shimmered faintly, like oil on water, a surface that refused to stay still. Shapes flickered within, faces half-formed, eyes blinking without lids, mouths opening soundlessly. I froze. The air thickened, crushing my lungs. My knees bent without command, and I realized I was kneeling. I tried to rise, but my body betrayed me. My hands pressed together, fingers interlocked, forming the shape of prayer though I hadn't willed them. The figure shifted, and the sound was not cloth but something heavier, scales or stone grinding against itself. "You came," a voice said, not aloud, but inside me, as if my bones carried the words. "You are already named." I shook my head violently, whispering that I didn't belong here, that I was only a scholar, only a passerby. But the figure tilted forward, and the hood's surface rippled, resolving into a face I recognized, my own. My own features stared back at me, lips moving in perfect silence. Then they smiled, a smile I knew I had never made. The dais creaked under its weight as it leaned closer. I felt its attention like heat, like the press of a furnace against my skin. The hood split wider, showing more faces within, hundreds layered atop one another, each mouthing fragments of prayer, curses, invocations. My ears rang with all of them at once, a cacophony that wasn't sound but recognition. "This is the chamber of reckoning," the voice continued. "The tribunal of marrow, you have already testified." I wanted to scream that I had said nothing, that I had only read one line by mistake. But deep inside, I knew that was enough. That was everything. Speaking the syllable had signed a contract my mind never saw, but my soul had. The throne raised a hand, or what passed for one. The sleeve unraveled, revealing a limb both skeletal and swollen, jointed in too many places, bone and sinew braided like cords. At its end, not fingers but spurs of polished bone, each etched with runes I could not bear to read. It reached toward me, and though the distance was great, I felt its touch on my chest. A burning brand seared into my skin, not with heat but with permanence. The mark carved itself into me, invisible but undeniable. My body shook with the imprint. "You are bound," it whispered, "not for death, for witness." The room groaned with shifting skulls, as if thousands beneath the dais exhaled at once. My taper guttered, shrank, died, yet the chamber did not darken. The bones glowed faintly, their marrow lighting like embers as though alive. And all around me, the niches whispered, their relics muttering fragments of scripture twisted into verdicts. I don't remember leaving. My next memory is of stumbling into the basilica's main hall, gasping for air, my clothes damp with cold sweat. The altar loomed above me, ordinary again, no sign of the seam I had found. My chest burned where the mark had been seared, though no scar showed when I tore open my shirt. Only the sensation of heat pulsing, syncing perfectly with my heart. Back in my room, I tried to sleep, but when I closed my eyes, I saw the throne again. I saw my own face smiling beneath the hood, and I realized with dread certainty it hadn't been showing me what it was. It had been showing me what I was becoming. The mark still throbs tonight, and I know the throne waits for me to kneel again, not as a trespasser, but as one of its own. I can no longer pretend I don't belong to it. Every day since I first descended to that chamber, I feel the pull like a rope around my throat. My chest burns where the unseen mark was branded, pulsing in time with voices that are not my own. I tell myself I will resist, that I will stay away from the stair behind the altar, but each evening my feet wander closer, as if guided by a rhythm only I can hear. Tonight I did not fight it. Tonight I let the mark guide me back down. The seam in the wall opened without effort, as if the stones were eager to admit me. The spiral stairs carried me again into the cavernous chamber, the air damp and heavy, walls lined with relics that whispered louder than before. But this time, I was not alone. Torches burned along the stairwell, held in brackets carved to resemble hands clutching upward from the stone. I followed them down, my steps echoing in rhythm with many others. Ahead, guards dragged figures in chains. They wore plain linen, but their faces, what I could see of them, were hidden behind stitches. Their eyelids had been sewn shut, thick cords of thread pulled so tightly the skin bruised black around them. Their mouths trembled as if trying to form words, but no sound escaped. They didn't struggle. They didn't resist. Each step they took seemed choreographed, as though they already knew the path. I should have turned back. I should have fled into the streets of Rome and never looked behind me. Instead, I followed, silent, one more shadow in their procession. When we entered the chamber, the dais and its throne loomed as before. But now the hooded figure was not alone. Around the dais stood priests in robes so crimson they looked wet, hoods drawn low, sleeves dragging across the skulls. They formed a circle, chanting the same syllables I had once heard in Vespers, though louder now, harsher, their voices hammering into my bones. The prisoners were led forward one by one and placed at the foot of the dais. The first was a man, his body frail, his skin ashen. Two guards forced him to his knees, and the hooded figure raised one limb, that skeletal-spurred hand etched with runes. It pressed the tip against his chest. At first nothing happened. The chant grew louder, the torches guttered, and then the man arched backward, his spine cracking audibly. His skin split, not as flesh splits with a blade, but as stone splits under frost. A fissure ran from sternum to throat, spreading across his chest like lightning. Light bled out, pale, cold, trembling, and his scream rose but never left his lips. The fissure widened until his body gave way, collapsing like a statue shattering, fragments falling lifelessly to the ground. From within, a small dark shape fluttered upward, writhing as though caught in invisible currents. The hooded figure extended its hand again, and the shape, screaming in a voice only my marrow could hear, was caught, absorbed into the sleeve. The priest stopped chanting long enough to murmur, "Judged." My stomach turned, my knees weakened. I told myself it was execution, ritualized death, nothing more, but deep down I knew better. They were weighing something, not lives, souls. The second prisoner, a young woman, trembled violently as she was brought forward. The stitches across her eyes bled fresh. She whispered words no one else could hear, but somehow I understood them. "Mercy, please." The hooded figure ignored her. Again the spurred hand pressed to her chest, and again the fissure appeared. This time the light was brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. But then, suddenly, the glow dimmed, snuffed out, leaving only emptiness. Her body slumped into pieces hollow. The hooded figure drew nothing from her, and the priests whispered in unison, "Unworthy." I wanted to scream, to intervene, but my throat betrayed me. The syllable I had spoken in the alcove pressed against my lips, warning me that silence was the only thing keeping me alive. My chest burned hotter, my mark thrumming with every chant, resonating as if it were part of the ritual. One by one they brought them forward. Each prisoner cracked open, judged, their light claimed or extinguished. Some collapsed empty, others were harvested, their essence drawn into the figure on the throne. I lost count after the seventh. The skull dais seemed to groan with satisfaction, as though it fed on each judgment. And then I realized there was no record being kept. No parchment, no ledger. The ritual itself was the record, each life weighed in silence, each soul captured or discarded. The trial was not for them alone. It was for the world, perhaps for all of us, a tribunal that never ended. When the last prisoner collapsed, silence fell heavy. The priests turned their hoods toward me. My blood froze. My knees locked in place. Slowly, one raised a sleeve and gestured in my direction. The guards stepped aside. They didn't drag me forward. They didn't need to. My legs moved on their own. I walked toward the dais, heart hammering, throat dry, every step an admission of guilt. The hooded figure leaned closer. Its shifting face rippled, forming my reflection once again, lips curved in that alien smile. The hand extended, spurs glowing faintly. I felt heat surge in my chest, the mark burning so hot it blurred my vision. But the hand did not touch me. It hovered inches away, waiting, testing. And then, slowly, the voice filled me again. Not yet. You will speak when called. Until then, you watch. The priests lowered their hoods in unison. For the first time I saw their faces, eyes hollow, sockets filled not with orbs but with moving shadows, swirling endlessly, spilling faint black tears down their cheeks. They bowed their heads to me, not in reverence, but in acknowledgement. I was no longer an intruder. I was a witness. The torches dimmed. The chamber sighed. And when I looked down, the floor beneath my feet was no longer stone but parchment, ink seeping up around my shoes. Words formed, curling into sentences I could not read, but somehow knew described me. My name repeated itself, over and over, written by a hand I could not see. The guards led me back up the stairs, their faces as blank as stone. When I emerged into the basilica, the world looked unchanged. Candles still burning, tourists shuffling in prayer, the scent of incense wafting in the air. But inside me, everything was altered. The mark pulsed like a second heart, each throb a reminder. I had seen the final judgment ritual, and it had seen me. The ritual isn't over. It waits, counting down in the beat of my mark, until the day I am the one brought to kneel. I have relived that moment 100 times already, and each replay feels less like survival and more like a sentence deferred. I know now that I wasn't meant to walk out of that chamber. No one leaves the dais once they are summoned. No one kneels at that altar and rises whole again, and yet I did. The memory returns in fragments, jagged shards pressed against the tender places in my mind. The guards' hands were iron clamps on my arms, dragging me forward while my heels scraped useless grooves into the stone. I didn't fight. My body was limp, my will hollowed out. The altar loomed ahead of me, carved from limestone so old its surface seemed fossilized, worn smooth where countless bodies had lain before mine. I remember the sound of my chains against it, the metallic clang echoing like a verdict already spoken. They fastened me down with gestures too practiced, as if they had done this thousands of times. My wrists bled against cold manacles, ankles clamped tight, throat exposed to the vaulted chamber. Above me, the ceiling stretched into darkness, veins of bone and shadow twisting together, waiting to drink whatever was about to be spilled. The chanting rose, low at first, then building in layers until it became a hurricane of syllables. My chest burned hotter than ever, the mark pulsing like a brand pressed from inside. I thought of the prisoners I had watched break open, their souls pulled screaming into sleeves and shadows. I braced myself for the fissure, for the shattering. I whispered to myself, I should never have come here, I should never have touched that alcove Bible, I should never have spoken the syllable. But my regrets were powerless against the ritual. The hooded figure leaned forward on the throne. For the first time, the faces in its shimmering hood all turned toward me. Hundreds of eyes opened at once, blinking without lids. Hundreds of mouths opened silently, forming prayers or curses. I couldn't tell the difference. The spurred hand extended, its bone tips glowing faintly red. It descended toward my chest. I screamed not aloud, but inside. My body arched upward, my soul already tearing. The mark on my skin burned like molten iron. The air thickened with pressure, as though gravity itself had singled me out. I felt the fissure forming, the split beginning, the first fracture in my sternum. My breath caught, my vision swam. And then it stopped. The spurred hand froze just above my chest, quivering as though restrained. The chanting faltered. The priests' voices cracked, syllables breaking into confusion. For the first time I heard hesitation in that chamber. The hooded figure tilted its head, and the faces within its veil rippled violently, cycling through expressions: rage, awe, hunger, recognition. Then, impossibly, laughter. It began softly, a low rumble deep in the stone, then louder, until the whole dais vibrated with it. The throne itself groaned as if struggling to contain the sound. My bones rattled, my teeth ached, and still the laughter rose, echoing in every skull stacked beneath. The hand withdrew, the spurs dimmed. My body sagged against the altar unbroken. The priests, chanting, collapsed into whispers, uncertain, trembling. The guards released my chains without instruction, their faces blank, eyes refusing to meet mine. My wrists throbbed, blood dripping where the iron had bitten, but I didn't move. I couldn't. "You are not to be weighed," the voice said, not in sound but through marrow. "You are to witness." My legs barely carried me when they pulled me to my feet. The guards did not drag me anymore. They guided me gently, as though I was suddenly fragile precious. I stumbled down the steps of the dais, heart hammering, head spinning. My eyes lingered on the shattered remains of the prisoners before me, their hollow shells, fissured like broken statues. Why them, and not me? What had set me apart? As I was led back toward the stair, I risked one glance behind me. The hooded figure still leaned forward, its veil shimmering with too many faces. But they weren't random anymore. They were focused. And among them, in the shifting, all-slick shimmer, I saw my own face once more, smiling, whispering the syllable, mocking me. Back in the basilica, the world seemed unreal. Tourists shuffled, candles flickered, the sound of Latin prayers drifted harmlessly through the air. I clutched my wrists, the marks of chains still raw. The sunlight through the stained glass painted colors across the marble, but even those colors seemed wrong, oversaturated, too alive. I told myself I was free, that I had been spared, but the mark in my chest refused that lie. It pulsed harder than ever, alive, watching. I wasn't spared, I was chosen. That night I sat awake, unable to close my eyes. Shadows on the wall lengthened and coiled, forming the outline of the throne, the shimmer of faces within the hood. My reflection in the mirror grinned when I did not. The syllable pulsed against my tongue, begging to be spoken. I wasn't supposed to survive. That chamber doesn't release witnesses. Yet here I am, alive, cursed, breathing borrowed air. I know now that the trial isn't something you escape. It's something you become part of. And worse, if I was spared, it wasn't mercy. It was a sentence of another kind. The ritual needs witnesses as much as victims, and sooner or later I will no longer just watch. I will preside. I was released, but not forgiven, and each day I feel the throne inside me, laughing, waiting for me to sit upon it. The first thing I did after they released me was run. I don't even remember how I made it through the basilica, down the winding streets of Rome, or back to the narrow cell that passed for my quarters. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the key twice before the lock yielded. I slammed the door behind me, dragged a chair against it, and pressed my back to the wall, gasping like an animal cornered. I thought, foolishly, that walls and wood could keep what I had seen from following me. Then the burning began. It started as a throb beneath my sternum, deep and steady, almost like a second heartbeat. Each pulse carried heat outward into my ribs, my arms, my throat. I tore at my shirt, desperate for air, only to see nothing on my chest. Smooth, pale skin, no scar, no wound. But when I touched it, the flesh was feverish, hot enough to blister. My fingers recoiled as though from fire. I dragged myself to the sink, doused a rag in cold water, and pressed it against my chest. Steam rose instantly. I scrubbed until the skin turned raw, crimson streaks flaring where my nails raked too deep. The heat only grew. I tore open the cabinet, spilled the contents: soap, olive oil, even a vial of holy water I'd been gifted by a pious colleague, and tried each in turn. The soap lathered and melted into foam tinged pink with blood. The oil slicked across the surface, evaporating in thin threads of smoke. The holy water hissed as though poured onto iron, the droplets vanishing before they could slide down my skin. By midnight, I had filled a kettle and poured scalding water over myself, thinking, stupidly, that if heat had made the mark, heat might erase it. Instead, the boiling water felt cool against me, as though the mark was drinking it. My skin should have been shredded, burned beyond repair. Yet when I looked in the mirror, there was nothing. No scar. Only the faint shimmer of light when the candle flickered, a phosphorescent glow threading beneath the surface, as if veins of fire had rooted themselves inside me. I collapsed on the floor, exhausted, half mad with pain and shame. That was when I heard it again, the laughter. Not loud, not in the room, but beneath my skin. A resonance in the marrow. Each pulse of the mark vibrated with it, not sound, Recognition. The throne was still with me, its echo lodged in my chest, mocking me for thinking I could wash away what had already been written. Sleep came only in fragments, and when it did, I dreamed of walls covered in script, lines bleeding, curling into mouths that chanted my name. I woke at dawn with teeth aching, my tongue raw, and realized I had been speaking the syllable in my sleep. My pillow was damp with blood, where I'd bitten through the inside of my cheek. I tried to hide it the next day. I dressed in clean clothes, buttoned my collar high, and forced myself to the archive reading room. The priests greeted me with polite nods, but I saw the way their eyes flicked downward, lingering on my chest. Some smiled faintly, knowingly, as if they could see the invisible seal. I sat at a table with a manuscript, pretending to study, but every word blurred. My attention was drawn instead to the beat in my chest. 1, 2, 3, each pulse like a syllable waiting to be spoken. When I left the room, one of the older priests brushed my arm in passing. His voice was low, cracked, but certain. "You bear the sigillum. Don't fight it. It isn't a wound. It's a covenant." I wanted to scream at him, to demand he take it back, remove it, exorcise it. But my throat locked. The mark pulsed hard, silencing me. By the time I found words again, he was gone. That evening I stood before the mirror again, candlelight flickering. For a moment I saw nothing, only my own tired reflection, the gaunt shadows beneath my eyes. Then the mark flared. My skin rippled, glowing faintly in a symbol I had never studied but somehow recognized. It wasn't language, it was verdict. My reflection's lips moved without mine, whispering the syllable, forming prayers my ears refused to catch. I struck the mirror with my fist, shattering it into fragments, but in each shard, my reflection still mouthed the word. I collected the shards, wrapped them in cloth, and threw them into the rubbish pit behind the quarters. But when I returned inside, the glass was whole again, waiting. I realized then that the mark wasn't something external. It wasn't written on me. It was written into me. Each beat of my heart etched it deeper, as if my blood itself was the ink. I could no more wash it away than I could wash away my bones. Tonight, as I write this, the heat grows stronger. Whenever I near the basilica, the mark burns as though tugged by an invisible leash. And when I retreat, it cools, but never fully. It waits, patient, simmering, like a brand glowing just beneath the flesh. I thought at first that surviving the dais meant freedom. Now I know the truth. They didn't spare me. They sealed me. No matter what I do, the mark does not fade. It only waits, warming with each heartbeat, counting down to the moment it will open me from the inside. I had started avoiding the basilica. Every step closer made the mark in my chest heat like iron in a forge. Pulling me toward the stair, I swore never to descend again. I walked the other way now, losing myself in the side streets of Rome. Hopping noise and neon could drown out the whisper that lived beneath my ribs. But the mark is not silenced by distance. It only grows restless, like a chained animal packing. One night, in desperation, I fled the city center altogether. The air was heavy, the sky bruised with storm clouds, and the cobblestones glistened under rain. I found myself wandering toward the ruins of an old cathedral just beyond the walls, long abandoned after fire had gutted its roof. Locals mutter that it is cursed, but no curse could feel worse than the one already inside me. I shouldn't have gone there. The gates hung open, rusted iron teeth bent outward as though something had pushed them from inside. I stepped through, my shoes crunching on gravel and glass. The nave was nothing but rubble, the skeletal remains of pillars rising like burned matchsticks. Rain fell through the open ceiling in crooked streams, pooling in hollows where pews once stood. I thought I was alone, until I saw him. He stood at the far end of the nave, motionless, a silhouette against the broken altar. His clothes were tattered, little more than rags clinging to a gaunt frame. At first I thought he was a beggar sheltering from the rain. But then he turned his head toward me, and I saw the truth. He had no eyelids. His eyes stared wide and unblinking, glazed but alive, rainwater streaming over them without resistance. His mouth opened, revealing gums stripped of teeth, a raw red cavern. The sight froze me in place, bile rising in my throat. Yet when he spoke, his voice was not broken. It was clear, steady, and horrifyingly familiar. It was the same voice that whispered from the mark in my chest. "You've spoken it," he said. His lips barely moved, but the words carried across the ruined nave as though the walls themselves repeated them. I staggered backward, shaking my head, but my chest betrayed me. The mark flared hot, throbbing in response, like an echo of recognition. He saw me wince, and a terrible smile cracked across his ruined mouth. "You bear it too," he whispered. "The seal, the witness mark." I wanted to deny it, to scream that I was not like him, that I was still human. But before I could, he stepped closer, and I saw the skin of his chest glowing faintly beneath torn cloth. The same shimmer, the same phosphorescent burn pulsed under his ribs. My knees weakened. I had found another. "I thought I was alone," I whispered. My voice shook. "I thought." He cut me off with a laugh, hollow and wet, the sound of something breaking inside. "There are always others. Always. We are chosen, not for mercy, but for permanence. They cannot keep the ritual themselves. It must spread. It must echo." He lifted a trembling hand, pointing at me with fingers blackened at the tips, as though frostbitten. "We are the verdict. Every breath we take is another line written. Every heartbeat is another sentence carried out." His words made my skin crawl. I tried to step back, but the mark pulsed harder, as though binding me in place. "What happens to us?" I asked, though I already knew. His unblinking eyes fixed on mine. "We change." And then, to prove it, he pulled open his shirt. Where his chest should have been flesh, there was parchment, thin, translucent, veins inked into scripture. Each breath he took made the words shift, rearranging themselves. I caught fragments in Latin, others in languages I didn't recognize. Some spelled names, dates, accusations. Others were warnings. My stomach churned as I realized they weren't just words. They were verdicts. Sentences carried out across centuries, recorded in his body. He leaned closer, rain dripping from his eyeless sockets, his ruined mouth twisting. "Soon your skin will write too. You won't need mirrors. You won't need ink. You will be scripture, walking scripture." I shook violently, clutching my chest, praying it wasn't true. But deep down, I already felt the truth of it. The whispers under my ribs were growing stronger each day. My skin tingled with every pulse, as if lines were already being written beneath the surface, invisible for now but waiting to bloom. I asked him why. Why us? Why witnesses instead of victims? He laughed again, softer this time, almost pitying. "Because death ends, but we do not. We carry the trial forward. We show the world what waits. We are the living warning, though no one believes until it's too late. We are marked to remember what others must forget." The rain poured harder. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face, his hollow body, the script writhing across his chest. And in that moment I saw my future in him. My lips trembled as the syllable pressed itself upward, begging release. I bit down, drawing blood, forcing silence. He leaned close enough that his breath mingled with mine. "Don't fight it," he whispered. "The more you resist, the louder it becomes. One day you will surrender, and then you'll come back here, to me, to all of us. The tribunal never ends." I stumbled away from him, slipping on wet stone, my heart hammering. He didn't follow. He only watched, smiling with that ruined mouth, the mark in his chest glowing brighter as mine burned in response. His voice carried after me, echoing through the ruins though his lips did not move. "We are not spared, we are bound." I fled into the storm, but his words followed, repeating inside my chest, written deeper with every step. I thought survival meant escape, but now I know. I am only another echo, another witness in a verdict that will never end. Fire, it has always been the oldest answer, hasn't it? When things defy explanation, when corruption festers too deep to root out, we burn it. That was my thought when I returned to the alcove. I carried a flask of oil stolen from the sacristy and matches concealed in my pocket. My heart thundered in my chest, the mark burning like an ember begging for kindling. The alcove waited as though it had never been sealed, the pedestal still there, the Bible lying open as if it had been expecting me. The last page, sewn flesh, inked in mouths instead of letters, still breathed faintly. My hands shook as I uncorked the flask and poured. The oil soaked the pages, bleeding into every pore, dripping down the pedestal and pooling at my feet. I struck the match. For one instant the flame was small, ordinary, human. Then I touched it to the page. The reaction was immediate. The fire hissed, but not like paper catching. It was like pressing flame against skin. The Bible shuddered. Yes, shuddered. The covers snapped open and shut, the pages fanning as if caught in a storm. But there was no wind, only a sound, a scream, not in the air, but in my head, splitting it open from the inside. The oil flared, fire racing across the text, but instead of blackening, the letters brightened. Each line glowed, searing itself into me through sight alone. I blinked, tried to look away, but the words branded themselves on the back of my eyes. I dropped the match, staggered backward, covering my face. The chamber itself seemed to howl with the fire, the skull walls rattling, relics clattering against their niches. The flames licked higher, yet the book did not char. It grew clearer, its symbols sharper, as though the fire was not destroying it but cleansing it, preparing it. Then all at once the flames collapsed inward. The Bible slammed shut. Ash poured from between its pages, spilling onto the floor. I thought briefly that I had succeeded, that only ashes remained. But when I looked closer, the ash was not ash at all. It was script. Words formed in grey dust, curling across the stones, writing themselves into names, dates, verdicts. And at the centre, spelled clear as daylight, was my name. I clawed at it with my hands, scattering the dust, desperate to erase it. But the words reformed instantly, crawling back together like insects. My name repeated itself again and again, each iteration darker, sharper, until it was all I could see. In panic, I kicked the Bible from the pedestal. It landed open, but the last page was no longer covered in words. It was blank, blank but not empty. The surface shone faintly, polished like a mirror. My own reflection stared back at me, pale, trembling, eyes wide. For a moment, I almost believed it was only me. Then the mouth, in the reflection, moved. Not in sync with mine, not delayed, independent. It opened slowly, forming the syllable I swore never to speak again. I clamped my lips shut, shaking my head, but the reflection continued, whispering it, savoring it, repeating it again and again. The sound wasn't audible, yet I heard it, deep in the mark. Each repetition set my chest alight, burning brighter, hotter, until I screamed just to drown it out. I hurled a shard of broken stone at the page. The reflection cracked, lines spidering across the surface. But instead of breaking, it multiplied. Now each fragment of the mirror showed my face, each one whispering, each one repeating the syllable. A choir of me, bound and damned, carrying forward what I could not silence. I fled the alcove, but the whisper followed. In the streets, the rain sizzled where it struck me. In the crowds, no one turned their heads, but I felt them shiver as I passed. Their eyes flickered for a second, glassy, hollow, as if they too had heard the word. The mark burned hotter with every step. In my room, the Bible waited on the desk, though I had left it in the alcove. It sat there calmly, pages closed, unmarked by fire. When I touched it, the cover was warm, pulsing faintly. The ash clung to my shoes, my hands, my clothes, spelling my name wherever I stepped, as though I had become the parchment itself. I tried one final act of denial. I tore the pages out, shredded them, scattered them in water, burned them again. Each time the words returned, on walls, on mirrors, on my skin when the light hit just right. I was no longer reading it. It was reading me. I understand now. The Bible didn't survive the fire. It doesn't need to. It lives in me. The mark is its binding, my chest its cover, my blood its ink. Every thought I have, every heartbeat writes another line. I don't just carry the book, I am the book. The trial hasn't ended. It has moved inside me. And when the day comes, when the throne calls again, I won't just be a witness. I will be the scripture they open, the verdict they read. The Bible no longer lies on a pedestal. It lies beneath my skin, and when I breathe, I hear the pages turning.